Karşıyaka is a district of Izmir province in Turkey. It is part of the greater metropolitan area of Izmir, in other words a metropolitan district, the second largest after Karşıyaka in terms of population, and it is almost entirely urbanized at the rate of 99.9%, with corresponding high levels of development in terms of lifestyle and services. Karşıyaka extends for 12 kilometers along the northern and eastern coastline of the tip of the Gulf of Izmir. Its center is at a distance of 6 kilometers to the north from the traditional center of entire Izmir, which is Karşıyaka Square in Karşıyaka at the opposite coast. And Izmir's central areas are of quicker and easier access from Karşıyaka by ferry, in 15 minutes to half an hour, to various quays located along the Gulf's eastern and southern coastline, rather than by land by going round the Gulf's outlying coastline. Karşıyaka's district area neighbors the district areas of Mengen to the north, Bornova to the east and Sigli to the west, the last two also being among Izmir's metropolitan districts. Karşıyaka's overall level of education is recognized as being of the highest in Turkey, and besides being an active venue of commerce, culture and educational activities and tourism, Karşıyaka also boasts an advanced urban culture of its own, centered on the cherished home team Karşıyaka SK, which commands a large and passionate fan base. Geology. Late created formations around Izmir consist of sandstone, shale, and limestone blocks, some of which may be larger than several kilometers. Such formations, which are generally observed on hills around the region, are the main reasons for resistance on the hills. In addition to these, the community of Neogen age can easily be estimated through the andesitic compounds of volcanic origin around Mount Yamanla. Such units can be listed as silicium, aluminum, sodium, lava with magnesium content, tough and tough stuffed lava agglomerates. The lava also contains reddish-brown and greenish-gray large feldspar crystals. Neogen sedimentary rocks are made up of claystone, sandstone and pebblestones at department, while being made up only of limestone on the top. At some places claystone is observed on limestone layers. It is possible to say that ground resistance is satisfactory in regions covered with limestone on top, while ground resistance is low in regions which has thin layers of limestone intercalated with mud rocks. Climate and environment. Karşıyaka bears the general characteristics of the Mediterranean climate zone. It is rainy in winter and hot in summer. As it is the case for Izmir's entire coastline, Karşıyaka benefits on a daily basis from the famous northwest wind called Mbat, because of which ships in the Gulf of Izmir will always be anchored in a northwest-southeast position, and which cools the city during summer days. Location. The industrial zone bringing together principally firms of local scale, exception made of the notable presence of Alabi shipyard, are located in the eastern part of Karşıyaka. The same eastern corner also covers a zone of sparse settlement around the locality called Sogukuyu, originally a seaside village of semi-nomadic Turkmens made to settle here in the 19th century, and to the north is a large forest area. Karşıyaka's center is connected to Izmir's center by a busy schedule of railways, roads, and commuter ferries. Works for the extension of Izmir's underground line to Karşıyaka are currently being carried out at a rapid pace, and there are also good road links to Menmen and Aliaga to the north, to reach Çanakkale in northwest Turkey, and beyond. Originally a hamlet, then a remote suburb of Izmir in the 19th century, Karşıyaka became much larger and grew in stature in the 1960s when its waterfront developed as a prosperous residential neighborhood. 35.5 and sport culture. Karşıyaka SK is the sports club of Karşıyaka. It is also called KSK, and locally as Kaf Sinkaf, following the initials in Arabic script, since the club's past dates back to Ottoman times. The club has a large and very passionate fan base. Karşıyaka supporters like to call the club the 35.5 to differentiate themselves from İzmir. That license plate number is 35. Although its football team is presently in the second level of the Turkish Football League system, it still represents İzmir's strongest bid for the Super League. Karşıyaka SK's basketball and volleyball branches, known respectively as Pınar Karşıyaka and Karşıyaka women's volleyball team, are leading contenders in their fields. Pınar Karşıyaka has won twice Turkish League, twice Turkish President's Cup and a Turkish Cup victory. The club also has Q sports, bowling, motorcycle, tennis, sailing, judo and swimming divisions. Karşıyaka have a fierce rivalry with Göztepe. The two İzmir teams are collectively known as the İzmir Derby. Other rivalries are against Bursaspor and Altay. District of Karşıyaka has hosted to 7th stage to finish of Tour of Turkey 2014 and Tour of Turkey 2015. Economy. Karşıyaka is deeply associated with commerce, construction of residences, education and literature, and is a prized area for pensioners, not only in the scale of İzmir but also from across Turkey as a whole. A total of 220,000 residences make up the urban area and the average yearly increase of the district's population is 2.3%. The district area having been almost entirely built up. Karşıyaka today acts principally as a residential center for the workforce of İzmir's industry and services, who generally commute for work to neighboring Sigli and Bornova, Alsancak across the Gulf, or even to locations further afield like Kemalpazar and Manisa. The share of agriculture and industry in its economy is in constant decrease, while Karşıyaka's tourism potential remains an open field. The waterfront is the wealthier part of Karşıyaka and it is here that residents of long date are generally concentrated. The neighborhoods located along the slopes are poorer, with slum-type residences in parts, and these continue receiving flows of immigration, especially from Turkey's eastern Anatolia region. The district counts a total of 11,570 enterprises, 207 of which are identified as industrial firms, and 3,180 categorized under commerce. 9 industrial companies have full or partial foreign capital and 143 commercial establishments in Karşıyaka are registered exporters. There are 18 banks providing services through 61 branches in Karşıyaka, and a handful of hotels with a total bed capacity of 180. There is one teacher for 24 students and one doctor for 1,127 patients overall. The literacy rate is very high at 92%. An environment of urban consciousness also favored the foundation of a high number of professional organizations in varied fields in Karşıyaka, ranging from trade to education, usually centered on teachers or alumni of the district's rooted institutions. History and sites of interest. Traces of the earliest phases of the timeline of İzmir, such as the Tomb of Tantalus and Old Smyrna, are located at a stone's throw from Karşıyaka. In the very recently constituted metropolitan district of Bayrakli, which was formerly within the boundaries of the district of Karşıyaka, Karşıyaka was described in frequent terms of admiration by travelers who visited İzmir, and they could not help but mention in detail the dense forests of Mount Yamanlı, reaching as far as the coast, and the beautiful gardens and orchards which garnish the shoreline and along the beds of its 4 streams, namely Ahirkuyu, Serenkuyu, Laka and Bornova, named Karşıyaka in Turkish since the 11th century. The locality was alternatively called Cordelio or Cordilio in European or Greek sources until the beginning of the 20th century. These names were supposed to make reference to Richard the Lionheart, who was not attested to have come to these waters in person, but it was usually claimed that the area was named in the 1190s by a contingent of crusaders of the Third Crusade who was accosted here and had named it in honor of Europe's most famed soldier of the time. This explanation of the name is disputed, some sources taking as point of departure the mention of the name in Byzantine documents of the 14th century and questioning whether the name Cordelio is the continuation of a more ancient settlement yet unexplored, as is most of ancient Aeolia. Still very leafy and lush generally despite intensive construction of medium to high-rise apartments and office buildings in recent decades. Karşıyaka grew in size after the entry into service of Izmir-Menemen Railroad in 1865, and the start of urban ferry services in 1874 by a British company under an Ottoman imperial lease accorded by Abdülhamid II and named Hamidiye for this reason. A second shipping company put 2 other ferries in service starting 1880, followed in 1884 by a third company. Very rapidly, it became fashionable for European and Levantine inhabitants of Izmir, concentrated in Bornova and Buca until then, to build or purchase houses in Karşıyaka, particularly for the dowry of their daughters, which contributed to the growing popularity among the rich of the Gulf's northern shores. In pace with its resort-like atmosphere, Karşıyaka saw a number of beautiful Ottoman Konakşehir Levantine mansions erected within its boundaries, especially along the shoreline and serving as secondary residence. Luxury multi-story residences at immediate seaside quickly rose next to modest inner courtiers around the train station where the working class was concentrated, and the Turkish village of Sogakuyu. The commuting movements and the way of life of Izmir's inhabitants were profoundly changed since then, with Karşıyaka becoming part of the urban fabric. A sizable Turkish population settled in Karşıyaka's Sogakuyu some time before that date, and that area is still distinguished by its rustic houses in the middle of the urban zone. In the meantime, the former village of Papaskala or Papaskala or Papaskoyu or Papaziskalizi to the west came to be known as Bostanli, in reference to melons and watermelons from Menemen which were discharged and loaded on ships here. The 4 most important reminders of the Levantine heritage still intact in Karşıyaka are the Alioti, Penati, Vandezi, and Lona houses. The first was built by a prominent Levantine family of Italian origins in 1914 and was exchanged in the 1920s against property belonging to Durmis Yazar, the founder of Yazar Holding. The mansion is known today under Yazar's name and serves as a vocational training center. The last 2 have recently been restored. The first floor of the Vandezi mansion has been put to public use by the municipality in the form of a cafe. There is also a 1904-built Catholic church that served a community of about 200 families and which is recently restored. Edouard Balladur, the former Prime Minister of France, notably, was baptized there. There are also more modest but still lovely little houses, characterized by their engaged front doors and narrow lines, termed as sakız houses, and which are highly typical of the region surrounding Izmir. Karşıyaka is also where Zübeyde Hanım, Ataturk's mother, spent her last days in End 1922 in January 1923, and is where she is buried. The house she died, which belonged to the family of Latife Saki, Mustafa Kemal Pasha's wife, is restored, and it is located right in the center of the urban zone, near the main commercial street. Karşıyaka's famous Karsi. Ataturk's feelings and words about Karşıyaka, İzmir and Karşıyakalılara, Sizi derin muhabbetle selamlarım. Ben bütün İzmir'i ve bütün İzmirlileri severim. Güzel İzmir'in temiz kalpli insanlarında beni sevdiklerine eminim. Yalnız bir rastlantı beni Karşıyaka'ya daha fazla bağlamıştır. Karşıyakalılar, anımsanan yerde, size and topraklarınızda yatıyor. Karşıyakalılar, İzmir'i gördüğüm gün once like Karşıyaka'yı ve arada size and Türk topraklarınızda yatan annemin mezarını gördüm. Administration. The urban zone of Karşıyaka is divided into 43 officially constituted neighborhoods, and the district also counts 2 depending villages. Sankaklai and Yamala, the last being located near the summit of the mountain of the same name of Mount Jamala, which towers over Karşıyaka and the Gulf. Karşıyaka is a stronghold of the Social Democrats. Currently, the municipality is administered by Hüseyin Mutlu Akpınar of the CHP. Gallery. Osman Bey Park is one of the most popular places of Karşıyaka. Typical residential buildings of the Karşıyaka neighborhood. A view of buildings in Meyvashiye from Bostanlı Shore. A view of Meyvashiye Shore.